register for classes, Mr. Sledge?
Thinking about it.
Good choice. Alabama Polytechnic is the best. Which branch do you serve in?
I was in the Marine Corps, miss.
USMC. And
how's it going, guys? We're going to get into it just 1 second here. I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of fun. Let you have a little bit of fun today. So today we're going to get into the recognized states with citizen-created grand juries, and I'm going to give you an example of one of them so you can sort of see the underpinnings of how it all works.
Broken. So how does the citizen grand jury come about? Well, it begins through a petition process where in Sedgwick County there would need to be about 3,500 valid signatures on a petition for this jury to happen. From there, the district county judge would determine if the petition has enough valid signatures under the statute's requirements. If this jury is then formed, it would consist of 15 random jurors from the county. From there, the jury would be able to determine if the facts support the findings to potentially charge someone, in this case, with crime.
It's a pre-trial, so to speak, because they look.
So basically, everybody, happy Memorial Day. And earlier I was trying to play a video. It was really cool. I think it was from an HBO series about the Marines. I forgot the name of it, but it was a guy, a mortarman. He was coming home from the war, trying to get a job, or trying to get into college, and she's asking him, "Hey, do you have any appreciable skills? You know, did they teach you anything of value?" And he's like, "I learned how to kill Japanese." And that's about all they taught him. So it looked like it was a grim prospect for him getting into an educational background. And so, happy Memorial Day weekend. That's why I'm wearing my cover. Actually, you know, just a little prop. But what I wanted to do is segue into this to let you know that there are a lot of guys who are vets who are really well trained as far as they know how to follow orders, and especially Marines, they know how to think on their feet and they know how to take personal initiative. And these are the kind of people that I go out of my way to try to hire, because anybody can be a lawyer. And so what I'm trying to convince everyone of is part of what I do as my work here on YouTube is to be self-reliant and try to start your own business and develop your own parallel systems with people who you like and trust to do business with. I think that's the best way to do things. That's the way our founding fathers did it. So basically what you just saw right now is the beginnings of what a grand jury proceeding looks like under state law. So in a few states, you can get one. Otherwise, good luck. Most federal courts won't recognize them anyways, unless it's totally through your state, unless it's done through their federal system. And so unfortunately, I've had to have the opportunity to represent several clients in federal grand jury proceedings. And so I have quite a bit of experience at this particular topic that I wanted to have fun with, to talk about a little bit and kind of explain what's going on. So this is another one of these videos where one of my viewers wanted me to talk about the grand jury process, civil grand jury process, and what it's all about. And it just so happens that Nevada has one. And then things started making sense about what everybody was saying. Hold on one second. Just let me look in the sidebar and thank everyone again. Thank you, Let's TVO, for showing up again. I really appreciate it that you're always here. Thanks, BZ Watchdog, for always showing your support. Happy Memorial Day. Thanks, Gloria Ad. Thanks, I Am God. And everyone else for showing up on this Memorial Day. I really, really appreciate it. Kurt Bronson, Katie Fry, James Forbes, as always. So I wanted to get in a little bit of information about grand juries, and then I understood, because at the very top, and I'll share this if I can scroll up fast enough before someone else comments. Boom. So look at the screen. So what Paul Berry was doing, and I guess a reason why a lot of you people wanted me to talk about this, is because Nevada is among one of a few states that allow a civil grand jury to convene. And I'm going to get into what a civil grand jury is in a minute. And I kind of did with the roll in with the video, so I could just react to it a little bit and tell you about how that went down. And that was about holding a public servant accountable, I believe, for someone getting killed in a jail. We're gonna see that in a little while. The full video. It's a short one, so just stick around with me. I promise not to spend too much of your time or waste too much of your time. But basically, Chile would need 240,000 ink signatures, according to Paul Berry. And he would have 180 days from start to finish to convene some kind of a grand jury against the presiding judge in his case. And that, I guess that's what they wanted me to do research on. I didn't really address that, but now I guess I understand what you guys, I didn't understand the mission because I wasn't given a mission goal other than to discuss. So that's what I'm discussing. But as you can see here, it looks like a very difficult process. Each signatory would have to sign an affidavit and provide an address as well. So I guess it's a much more difficult to hold public servants accountable than it is to vote, because to vote, you don't even need an ID. Just imagine how many public servants could have gotten elected by use of voter fraud, and you'd never have any evidence of that because there is no way to verify, right? Think about that. You don't have evidence, so you can't prove it. Therefore, there's no evidence, and therefore there's no fraud. Is that really the thinking that we have as Americans? So let's move on a little bit forward into this. Give me a bunch of OTVOs, everybody. And if you don't know what that is, that's Overturned Terry versus Ohio. Make sure to smash and hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure to do that for me. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into Chevy in the house. That's right. So we're going to get into it, guys. And we're going to talk a little bit about, well, first off, we're going to go ahead and we're going to play the whole video from start to finish, so you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. So let me just get in here and share this bad chicken with you. We're just going to play this bad chicken. Here we go.
All right, after a lot of questions this weekend over what comes next in response to the C.J. Lofton case, county leaders decided to support more efforts to find out what the U.S. Department of Justice could do after Lofton died after being in custody today. Some say the best option could be to come up with a grand jury investigation. KSN's Jessica Watson joins us now with some answers on what a grand jury could do. Jess.
Craig, it is in Kansas state law that if enough citizens disagree with a state finding of no felony charges, a citizen grand jury can be put into place to investigate if Kansas law was broken. So how does a citizen grand jury come about? Well, it begins through a petition process where in Sedgwick County, there would need to be about 3,500 valid signatures on a petition for this jury to happen. From there, the district county judge would determine if the petition has enough valid signatures under the statute's requirements. If this jury is then formed, it would consist of 15 random jurors from the county. From there, the jury would be able to determine if the facts support the findings to potentially charge someone, in this case, with crime.
It's a pretrial, so to speak, because they look at all of the evidence to determine whether or not someone believes, based on evidence, where Kansas law is broken. And is it reasonable then to charge someone with a crime and then prosecute them?
From there, if the jury does not agree with the original findings, then the matter could be prosecuted like any other criminal.
Okay, so you kind of see what's going on. Basically, we have somebody who is killed and public servants aren't being held accountable according to the people. And so the people have convened a grand jury because the people want to overturn that and they want to get a presentment issued in order to institute a grand jury. In this particular state, I think it was Kansas. Put it in the comments if I'm wrong. In this particular state, a grand jury apparently has convened or did convene. This was years ago, just an example I wanted to give you. And then it looks like a presentment was issued. And then after that happens, a grand jury convenes. And I don't have the outcome of this, but this story has legs because I want to walk you through the process of how this works. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play the rest of the video. It only is a few seconds left.
Case. Here for you, Jessica Watson, KSN News 3.
No.
All right, after a lot of questions,
that was about it. So, okay. So you saw the video. So let's just go ahead and get into the meat. So basically, there's a couple of issues that are coming up here. One is we know that there is the common law grand jury. A lot of people call them sovsits or common law this, freemen, whatever you want to call them, who are being the government and the administrative state throws everybody into this big pot, right? Anybody who disagrees with the way things are, unless it's the academia, philosophy, or the state's push narrative, is considered to be, I guess, an outcast now, and their social credit score gets harmed, right? Isn't that the idea? If you don't go along with the program, sound like Mao Zedong version 2.0. So basically, in the old days, we had the ability, the people had the ability to convene these grand juries. And especially when our rights were taken away under the king, we just naturally just went back to the common law grand jury system because we didn't have courts, right? The king took away our powers. And so we had to do it ourselves. And that was just a natural law philosophy that you would, in order to get a presentment and then ultimately an indictment against someone who'd committed a crime, or to remove someone from office who'd committed a crime, this may be an approach that they could have used, and in fact did use in many instances. Let me just look in the sidebar really quick to see if anybody has any questions about it. And Texas Bill of Rights is freeman. Well, I just think everybody should have a say, and you can't just automatically dismiss them as crazies or whack jobs, because there are a lot of things people in these movements say that do have merit. There are just other parts that do not pass judicial muster under this current system that we're in. And therefore, you won't be taken seriously. And if you're not taken seriously, you're not going to be effective. And if you're not effective, it's easier to paint you as a crackpot. So one of my goals is to have you taken seriously. And that's why I recommend that people who have the mental acuity and the desire and the discipline, because it takes an enormous amount of discipline to become an attorney, at least under the merit system that I was on. The merit-based bar exam is a very difficult exam. And if you can get through it, more power to you. So the idea behind this today is to show you the different arguments, is the ones that I could find. And if I missed any, I want you to throw them in. This is going to be based upon sort of a hodgepodge of original English common law and prior to that and moving forward. And then, if there's a particular state statute that I mention, I'll use it. But one of the goals is to differentiate between the state grand jury system and the federal grand jury system, because I see a lot of people who have a misunderstanding when it comes to case law, where they'll be trying to cite a lot of federal cases in state court or state cases in federal court. And that's not always looked kindly upon, and you have to make sure you're doing it right, which we'll go into in other videos in the future. So you'll do this properly. And of course, as a general proposition type stuff, like for example, in California, I prefer to write in the California style manual, not the blue book style. So there's writing styles that your jurisdiction may have that are different. There's so many different variations, and then there might be civil, local rules, all kinds of things that you need to know. But I'll try to explain things in a way that'll help you do your own research and come up with the answer for precisely where you are. And that's what this slideshow is hopefully going to do. Give me a bunch of ones, because I had my kids create this slideshow for me. My son's quite a bit of a historian, and I'm trying to teach them how to be young entrepreneurs and also be maybe teachers someday. Maybe they'll be educators on like homeschool educators, or maybe they'll be homesteaders and they'll be able to take care of their kids and get away from all this craziness, right, guys? So we could only hope, right, that we could unplug from the system and be free. So everybody, let's see here. So I appreciate it that Let's OTVO is doing a really great job, as well as Basil, and making sure we keep all the trolls down in the sidebar. Now I understand. I admit now I understand what you guys were saying originally, that it doesn't make sense to have disruptive people who aren't interested in contributing in any way, shape, or form to a positive future for America and the American people. So let's go ahead and get into recognized states with citizen-created grand juries. Then we'll get into a little bit about the common law movement and what's going on there. And I'll even talk to you a little bit about what common law kind of really means, and then sort of how it's a little bit different sometimes when it's used in a modern, like maybe courtroom kind of a setting. But the first thing we want to understand is that the idea of a grand jury is that it was going to be formed by citizens rather than the traditional legal entities. And this was because of the massive corruption that the king and the king's men, right, his servants, were always engaged in. And this is just a historic thing. It's not like it's new to us. We see a lot of it happening now as the government becomes more of a single party system, right, or a uniparty type system. Look at California. It's much easier to commit fraud and get away with voter fraud and things like that because you lose your checks and balances, right? The idea is to have as much chaos as you can within all these differing parties to where little gets done, and you can even maybe delete laws instead of passing laws. That was the idea behind our republic. And the grand jury system was one of those checks and balances that enable the people to sort of take back and claw back a little bit about what's going on. And so talking about clawback, so I work on sometimes, not often, cases that are outside the car accident realm. And we've had a couple in the past couple of years that involve federal grand juries. And so I just want to let you know right now, the federal grand jury system falls outside these state grand jury systems. It's totally separate. And as a general rule, they won't recognize a citizen grand jury of any way, shape, or form unless it's through their federal system. So just keep that in mind, guys. They won't recognize it. States might, some states may, definitely a few will, and other states may, if you have the right representative. It really is based upon, more than anything, on perception. Just like your perceived value of Federal Reserve notes, they have value, even though they don't have an intrinsic value, but you perceive them to have value. That's how authority is as well. And if we, the people, agree to have or convene our own type of grand jury, unfortunately, it wouldn't have force of law. There would be no punishment method, right, to enforce it. But if you were in a parallel system where being shunned what meant worse than even going to a regular jail, right, then it would be something that would be a favorable thing to have. So that's why when I say parallel system, I don't necessarily mean the same punishment. But look at the Amish or other people who are homesteaders who form these loose confederations and alliances. They come to rely on each other, and they don't want to be shunned by one another. And so it basically, that's the system that I'm proposing. Give me a bunch of ones if you think that's a great idea, because I think that is part and parcel of what a civil grand jury system could, in fact, recreate, because it's one of the things that made America so productive and prosperous during the Revolutionary period. So keep that in mind. Divesting power from the state or from a centralized king, more of a natural law process where you bring it back home, right? Bring it back home, take it away from the Leviathan. You become more prosperous. The banks become less prosperous. And we see underpinnings of banks and wars being caused over this kind of stuff, banking systems and currency, than anything else, if you look at the underpinnings of all wars. So the grand jury system represents a way to get us away from that system, I believe, after doing this additional research today. But it depends on who's running the grand jury system. And currently, as I said, the federal grand jury system is run by the feds. And so, for example, I do have a little piece of advice, and obviously check your local state. But if you have a corporation and your corporation is accused of violating some kind of federal law, some kind of trade law, or violating some kind of, Medicare, Medicaid statute, whatever it might be that could bring something hard down on you, right? And if you set that up as a corporation and you're called to stand tall before the grand jury, your normal traditional common law Bill of Rights don't apply to you. So the grand jury system can be a double-edged sword in practice. And the same rule applies to the state grand jury too. The normal, because of the federal decisions that apply to the states, unless otherwise provided by law, I always have to give that caveat, you're not going to have the same sorts of the rights to object. So you can't plead the fifth. You got to answer, right? Now that's if you answer if you have a corporation. So I've always recommended if you're in any of these businesses that have a high propensity to lead to investigations, that you keep it yourself set up as a solo, right? Sole proprietor, and everything's handled by you as a sole proprietor. Just forget trying to get a corporate shell. You don't need it anyways, because you're in such a high risk business anyways, right? Who cares? All it's going to do is act as a mechanism to work against you. However, even though some of your regular rules to be able to defend yourself would apply, like, I have a right to talk to my attorney if it's just you and not a corporation that you work through, because the custodian of records and all these other people can come now and testify against you. Think about that. So what you want to be able to do in that situation is avoid being put in that situation by thinking ahead. Now, with respect to these, so now you've got a situation where you have a company that's being called before a grand jury, and those rights don't apply. Okay, fine. But if you do have the company protecting you, it doesn't really protect you. So if it's just you as a sole proprietor, now you can plead those defenses. The problem is that you're not entitled to, under a grand jury system, the ability to have exculpatory evidence, guys. So that's a big problem with the grand jury system. So this is another thing that works against somebody who is being brought before a grand jury. Okay, I'm hoping this is all making sense. Give me a bunch of ones if you understand so far. If you're called before a grand jury, you don't have the same ability to bring forth exculpatory evidence. Now, hopefully you guys know. Look, I'm just going to tell you, exculpatory evidence is simply evidence that is favorable to you. Look up the Izzazaga case, Izzagaga. That, I think that's either California or US, but it's the seminal case, at least for me, on discovery. And basically what it means is that the prosecution must give you evidence that's favorable towards you being acquitted, even though we know they don't do it, because we know that a lot of scumbag prosecutors put their careers over people, and they'll try to seek a conviction no matter what, because it helps them get a promotion or win some kind of an election. And this is another reason why I believe strongly in the grand jury system, because this would be a way to come after these people if an ethics investigation says that they didn't do anything wrong, because it's their own buddies who investigated them. I mean, think about how ridiculous that is. Absolutely insane. So let's get into this right now. Boom. When the American colonies separated from England, King John retaliated by revoking their charters, leaving them without any legal authority. So what they did, since they had knowledge of civics and common law was widespread, they went ahead and formed common law grand juries. And then that enabled them to continue the functions of government. So hopefully this is making sense so far. If you guys can see this, it's helped. They're basically saying our founding fathers, the people who ran the colonies, were already pretty much independent. They were not under direct rule from the king, and they became independent. They weren't stupid. A lot of them spoke 7 different languages. They were educated in classical education. They knew how to do things. They knew how to build things. They knew how to do things. If you could get them raw material, they were self-sufficient. You follow me? Are you tracking me so far? Okay, so here we go. We're going to keep on going. So you understand, they formed common law grand juries, and they were able in such a way to be able to continue functioning their government systems. Now, the progeny of the citizen grand jury is the Magna Carta, based upon my research. Hey, what's up, Chuck P? Yeah. And so basically at that time, I don't know if a lot of you know what's going on, but the king, being under threat from the nobles in Parliament, had to agree to certain conditions, like everybody was entitled to things like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, at least if they were a freeman. Peasants still weren't quite there, but people with a knight's fee clearly were going to be treated better. But still, this was the first step towards people being recognized as equals among men. And Clause 61 of the Magna Carta of 1215 basically established this committee of barons to oversee the king's compliance with the charter. And this was an early form of checks and balances. And this is what we were seeing earlier in the video, the checks and balances. And if you have any questions or you want to add to the conversation, please do. Now, the next document that sort of recognizes these rights to a grand jury is going to be the Assize of Clarendon, and that's 1166. And that was issued by King Henry, and it established the practice of using a group of local men, jurors, to accuse individuals of crimes and lay the groundwork for the modern grand jury system. So keep in mind that the Sixth Amendment gives you the right to a jury. The grand jury system is a little bit different. The grand jury system is a process of presentment and indictment. Okay, so repeat after me. It's a process of presentment and indictment. A jury trial under the Sixth Amendment provides you with jury of your peers, allegedly, who is going to weigh the evidence. And under the old system, the law and the facts. Under the modern system, the facts only, unless you believe in jury nullification. And that would be the way that system goes. So it's basically giving the trier of fact the ability to weigh everything and decide whether or not you're guilty after this evidence was presented. So the dissenting opinions in, let me just see if I can find this case. So I'll just show you really quick. How's that sound? United States versus Williams, as far as I could ascertain, is the seminal case. Let me just share this one with you. All right, so United States versus Williams. Don't let me get too far off track, everybody, because I will do that sometimes, but this is really important. So United States versus Williams, the citation is 504 U.S. 36, 1992. So this case just talks about the federal grand jury system and about how you can withhold exculpatory evidence. So it doesn't really give you a fair shake. I hope this is making sense. I'm just trying to find, there's some other things in here too that are important, but the main thing that got me is the dissent was scathing. And so this had to do with knowingly making a false report for the purpose of influencing the action of a federally insured financial institution under Title 18. So I don't know if you guys remember what I said earlier about, it's better just to have everything in your name and don't even bother trying to create a corporation, because when you're involved in a business like that, for example, like financial institutions, Series 7, any of that kind of stuff, man, at some point or another, the feds are coming to ask you questions. I'm telling you, so many of my friends, if you're going to be in that business, just be careful. But the bottom line is, in that particular case, the United States versus Williams case, my take on it, this one right here, again, it's, let me just copy and paste it for you into the sidebar. It's kind of a cool case to know about, because it basically says that you're not entitled to exculpatory evidence in a grand jury proceeding. So that means that you can basically have an indictment go forward, because the prosecutor's leading the show, he's going to get the indictment. And then only then can you present the exculpatory evidence to get the case thrown out. And so the dissent was just scathing, obviously. I mean, think about how ridiculous that sounds. I mean, give me a bunch of ones if you think that it sounds ridiculous, because I think it sounds insane that you wouldn't be able to include exculpatory evidence, which is evidence that could potentially set you free, like a videotape proving that you didn't shoot this person, or fingerprints proving that someone else held the murder weapon and not you, right? Or something proving that you were in a coma in a hospital. But now you can't do that. So anyways, let's get back to the Assize of Clarendon. I hope you guys are liking this. Look, I know it's Memorial Day weekend and it's like on a Sunday, but I'm super busy next week. I've got several appearances. I've got one in LA and one in San Francisco, and I'm just going to be running myself ragged. And so I don't know if I'm going to be able to do a show on Monday night. But let's get into the Assize of Clarendon. So basically, it just established a group of local men. And then now we're coming into the American common law documents. And so when I say American common law, what I mean is everything, basically America, all those documents from England we inherited. We are basically English by our birthright as Americans. And what ended up happening is the Bill of Rights and some other documents like the Articles of Confederation and the Unanimous Declaration sort of shaped our version of English common law, where we evolved in favor of natural law, whereas English law veered in favor of the Hobbesian, Leviathanic type of law with powerful central control. Remember, the king is the sovereign and his rights come from God, whereas natural law theorists believe that everybody's rights come from God and that the government is not above men. And in fact, men are above government, and the government must be bound by the chains of the Constitution and bound and held down to preserve the rights of free men to flourish. And one of the things that helped us flourish as colonies was our ability to be self-sufficient and self-reliant and educated in the classics. Classical education has always been crucial towards building a strong foundation. Okay, so let's get back into this because this is a really cool. So now you understand that American common law is just basically a continuance of all of the positive aspects of English common law, which actually was not a bad society as far as justice was concerned to a degree. But American common law was designed to interject equitable principles where the rights of the individual were more important than the rights of the majority or the mob. So in other words, you can never protect the rights of the minority until you respect the rights of the one person and their rights, which is the exact opposite of communism, socialism, and Marxism that is primarily and pervasively being taught directly and indirectly on our educational institutions today. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that sentiment. Now, the Bill of Rights in 1791 explicitly required a grand jury indictment for capital or infamous crimes, securing the role of the grand jury as a fundamental right in American jurisprudence. So that's in our Bill of Rights, and therefore, under the 14th Amendment that came along later, would arguably extend to the states under the 14th Amendment as a protected right. Thank you for all the ones, by the way. I hope you guys are liking this because this is by suggestion of a viewer, and I try to get these things done in an hour if I can because I know people get bored. But I just like to do this because I don't see any really good educational stuff out there that really tells people what's going on in a way that they can understand in bite-sized pieces. And my goal here again is to teach you some legal principles and help you understand the law, not just the history. So the Judiciary Act of 1789 established the federal judiciary. And basically that provided for the use of grand juries in criminal cases, embedding the grand jury system into the federal judicial process. Okay. And that's in 1789. Now, citizen grand juries have a strong historic context, especially in the evolution of the early days of coming up to the United States, when we were actually just colonies and then independent, lowercase u United States, where all the states were much more sovereign than they are today and operated independently for the most part, unless for trading or mutual benefit, which is how it was. And that's what the king did not like, as you'll recall. Thank you, Chevy. So, and give a bunch of ones to my kids for helping me with the slideshow, because I think they really did a good job. And I really want to teach them how to become YouTube video creators so maybe they can make a career out of, maybe start a marketing company or something. Give me a bunch of ones if you like the idea of teaching your kids how to start their own business. So in the historical context, the early days of the United States, this just reflected, citizen grand juries basically reflected a continuation of English common law traditions. In modern usage, citizen grand juries are often informal and lack legal recognition. And what I mean by this is the common law citizen grand juries, especially in the federal system. And if you do a cursory search on Google, that you'll clearly see that especially the federal government doesn't like the idea of having their public officials indicted or challenged And they typically will paint anyone who disagrees with them and their academic institutions as being a crazy person or as a potential violent anti-government extremist. That's how you're painted, and you're thrown into that little bag of deplorables, as they call them. Now let's just do a little comparison. The Magna Carta versus the modern citizen grand juries. While the Magna Carta established foundational legal principles, modern citizen grand juries are informal bodies. And as such, they try to assert similar principles of oversight and accountability, but without any formal legal authority. And so this is one of the things that I was trying to tell you guys is, you can set up your own grand jury system, sure, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have the ability under the legal system and under our modern society without risking being thrown in prison or jail or taken out by the police unless you do it through a recognized governmental system. So you can try in some states where it is allowed and recognized, again, to exercise an informal effort with signature gathering on your own and contact your local law enforcement agency or whoever would be overseeing some kind of government action against a public servant or someone else who you're trying to get an indictment against. It doesn't necessarily mean you want to go after someone like Judge Zimmerman or after a crummy school teacher, whoever you're trying to get the indictment against. You could try and do an informal grand jury under this common law grand jury system, but it wouldn't be recognized as having formal legal authority. And so it would have to be a voluntary system. And you could definitely do that as a parallel system, but you would not have the power of enforcement. You would have the power of shunning, and that's what the Amish do, and to a lesser degree, modernly, the Mormons. And they've had significant success in holding communities together by using just the power of shunning. And so the next issue would be the Assize of Clarendon versus modern citizen grand juries. The Assize of Clarendon institutionalized the grand jury system, whereas modern citizen grand juries are grassroots efforts, often lacking sanction. So as you can see, there was state approval of one, and the other one is sort of out of necessity. We have to form these grand juries. I hope you're seeing that. Now, the Bill of Rights versus modern citizen grand juries. So the Fifth Amendment enshrines the grand jury as a formal part of the legal process, contrasting with citizen grand juries, which operate outside the formal judicial system. So know that I'm not saying they're illegal or anything like that. It's just that if you use them in a way that's illegal, then they're illegal, at least in the eyes of our modern constitutional government that's in place now, our modern statutory government that's in place now. You're not going to have success, and you're going to end up locked up. So just don't get crazy. Look at what I'm presenting you and look at the legal ways to form a grand jury and the legal ways that you could have your own grand jury without violating someone else's rights or putting yourself at risk of violating some kind of statutory law that you may or may not agree with to begin with. So the Judiciary Act of 1789 versus modern citizen grand juries. What does that look like? So I'm trying to compare and contrast. The Judiciary Act legally formalized grand juries within the federal system. So while modern grand juries remain unofficial, their indictments are not recognized by many courts. And so we saw that with the Freemen of Montana and other sovereign type organizations and people where they would go after the fidelity bonds because every public servant has to swear a fidelity oath and they have to get it bonded. So every public servant, a lot of people don't know this, have to get a bond. And the idea behind that is that if they violated their oath, that people could file a lien against their bond or take action against their bond to have them hopefully removed and pay for their violations. And there's a strong history behind that. And so what the Freemen and other people were doing is they were going and they were getting liens against those bonds. And I believe they were cashing them in. They were like selling the liens or selling the bond. I don't know how they did it, but they were somehow able to get a bunch of what they called Federal Reserve notes. And it was just a really interesting thing. Put it in the comments if you remember the Freemen of Montana. Really interesting. I don't see a lot of really stuff that's on point about them anywhere online. If anybody knows anything about them or what happened, I'd love to have you on as a guest to tell me. But in any event, we can see that their indictments, the Freeman's indictments, they weren't recognized either. And ultimately they were surrounded, I believe, by the FBI. And I remember them. I remember them from seeing on TV, there was an upside down flag over like a log cabin, and they were in negotiations with this attorney who was like a cowboy. I kind of like a Montana version of me, you know, had the cowboy hat and all that, kind of like, he was kind of a little eccentric. And this dude was going back and forth, and ultimately they surrendered. But I remember that very well, and it was a really interesting part of history. And it was one of the first big wars against the people versus the FBI and the ATF and all those guys. Now, current grand juries are run by county or federal prosecutors. And the reason I'm saying that is because the federal system is different from the state. So your typical grand jury in a state is going to be run by a prosecutor. But there are going to be some exceptions on how they can be formed, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Like, imagine if you have a corrupt prosecutor, who's going to form the grand jury then? And that's the problem that many have with this hodgepodge grand jury system, and also with the federal one in particular, how they always seem to insulate themselves from the same rules they want everyone else to abide by, causing many to believe that they're no different than how it was under King George, just under a new name. Now, there have been many setbacks to the nonviolent government-run grand jury, the CLGJ movement. So there's a movement, and what these guys are trying to do, there's actually a movement out there to try and do these grand juries. But one guy was arrested for practicing law without a license, and he was put in jail. So not every government entity is accepting of these projects. So that's another thing I caution a lot of you people, is you have to be careful. And I tell my clients, and some are reckless and some are not. And not everybody is going to listen to the advice of counsel. But I always try and make it clear to everybody that you can't just go out there and start telling people to do stuff that could be construed as practicing law without a license. Because even if you're not, they're going to have the administrative state, this licensed person who has been taught from cradle to grave that unless it's government approved, it's not real, and that there's no way it could be valid. Unless it's in Wikipedia and supports that particular position, it's got to be wrong. And that's how a whole entire generations have been brainwashed to think. They don't even understand anything about natural healing or natural medicine. They think you're a crackpot. So just remember that before you do these things. So I'm going to go ahead and get you back on track right now. Roger that. Here we go. And again, everybody who's joining, happy Memorial Day weekend once again. And here I go. Boom. So there are also states that have citizen-initiated grand juries that are allowed under their either state statutes or constitutions. And those are for the criminal formation of criminal grand juries. And the video we just watched was Kansas. Other states are New Mexico, North Dakota, Nebraska, and there's Nevada, Julie DeCastro. Then there's Oklahoma after that. Oklahoma. So anybody, if you're from Oklahoma or know anybody who's got a channel out in Oklahoma, let them know they've got that ability to form their own. And I do have a Navy SEAL friend who lives in Oklahoma, and I'm going to tell him about this because I think that he should get a criminal grand jury indictment against somebody that we don't like. I'm just kidding. So anyways, what you want to do is you got to be able to get sufficient signatures, and that's how you mandate a judge to summon the grand jury. So in this case, it looks like a judge will summon a grand jury. Now, I think each state will have their own methodology as to how this happens. It may have to go first through a prosecutor's office in some states or all of them. So don't hold me to gospel on this, guys. Remember, I try to teach general principles if I don't know the exact statute or code or section for each state, because they're always different, or there's always going to be something that's a little bit different to where they're not exactly the same. So give me a bunch of ones if you understand that these are the states that actually allow citizen-initiated grand juries, and there's not that many of them. And notice, where they're located. Here, I'll show you. Check this out. Well, first, let's talk about this a little bit more. So what is a grand jury? A grand jury is usually going to be composed of 16 to 23 individuals, and their job is to review the evidence that's presented by prosecutors. So now, in this case, citizens could present evidence to a citizens grand jury as well, or there could be evidence left over from a previous prosecution that was ignored or left out of the case by a court. Well, that evidence could potentially come in because the normal rules of evidence wouldn't apply to things that maybe even had been obtained in violation of the evidence code. By the way, thanks, James Forbes, for becoming a member. I like to share things with my members like James Forbes that I don't share publicly. Sometimes I'll take my videos that are public and put them into the members only section after a while, once I feel they're not really helpful to the channel for the overall mission, but yet may have some significance to the members who like to dig a little bit deeper into my project and what I'm trying to do to help society. So now I don't necessarily understand whether or not all these different states are going to have these same rules, like I said. But you can look in United States versus Williams, which is the case that I talked about earlier, and it does talk about, at least in the dissent, how the grand jury is supposed to act as a buffer between the government and the people to ensure there is sufficient evidence to formally charge a suspect. But the problem is with the grand jury system right now that I have, which I've explained to you earlier, is that it seems to give the government the ability to unfairly have an advantage in that they do not have to present exculpatory evidence, aka evidence that would be favorable to the person who potentially could be indicted. And when you think about the defaming of this person once they would be indicted and how that would affect their reputation, knowing that there's no recourse to sue the FBI typically or these government agents, you can see how easily a corrupt government agency could be used to blackmail and destroy someone who went against the official government narrative, and why it's more important than ever that we all reconsider learning classical education and forming parallel systems where we look after each other so that we don't have to be so locked in. And I'm also going to be getting into some videos in the near future that talk about the cell phone surveillance system and basically the non-existence of the Fourth Amendment in this country, at least at the level of having personal privacy and freedom in our location, where we are, our communications, et cetera, which we'll go into in another episode in the future. Thank you very much, Chevy. I really appreciate that. I'll tell my daughter that she did a good job. And I always appreciate it that when these super chats, I know that YouTube ends up with the lion's share, or at least a lot of it. I'm not really sure how it goes down because I haven't really checked yet. I don't really know how all this stuff works, but I really do appreciate it because it shows that recognition is important. Even if it's not money, recognition is important to everybody and it's good for their spirit. So I always try to teach that to my kids, to always give people recognition and give them their due. Give me a bunch of ones if you believe that you should always give people recognition and always put other people first. Now, the issue is right now grand juries could be used as a bludgeon instead of a tool to protect people from the government. And so I believe that we need to make some serious changes to our jury system, our grand jury system, at the federal level in particular. Now, and I think that other states should initiate. Oh my gosh, Chuck P, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. We don't stop. By the way, everybody, hit that like and subscribe button. Hit that like and subscribe button and give me a bunch of OTVOs for Chili. And I did speak with Chili the other day, and he seemed to be in high spirits. And I think that we will, I'm hoping to have some good news about him in the near future. I'm always trying to be positive. Never, ever want people to suffer, guys. You never want to wish pain or suffering on people. It's really bad, and it can cause great pain it can cause cancer. It can cause health problems. So you need to cleanse your mind. Take judo. Look, you're never going to avoid getting angry and upset, but take judo, do meditation, do something like that. Hey, thanks, BZ Watchdog, man. You guys are so awesome. I really appreciate it. So listen. So the idea behind the Sixth Amendment is, I'm very humbled by everybody because I know that one man's $4 or $5 is another man's $100 or $100,000, and I get that because I've been there. I've had great successes. I've had great torturous pitfalls because of the government shutdown of the economy and how that really, really hurt our law firm in a big way and caused a lot of people to lose their livelihoods who work for me. And it's really, really a disappointment, that I'm moving forward, trying to be positive. And now, because the kids are older, I'm trying to teach them too. So it gives me an excuse to use this hour or so that I try to spend with you to help teach you and teach them at the same time. So everybody, thank you for joining me. And so let's keep going. So here we go, guys. Let me just clear the screen. Thank you again, Let's OTVO. You rock, brother. You are awesome. I've got like this whole army of contributing members, and all my contributing members, I make them Lance Corporal, and I'm trying to figure out a way to add the Lance Corporal insignia. I just can't figure out how to do it. So right now they have a blue star. Somebody help me. I don't know how to do any of this technical stuff, but here's the deal. I've got this army of people, and they're really cool, and they really care about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So I make them Lance Corporals. I think that's what they're called anyways. And then everybody else, you guys are like privates and private first classes. And I guess if you're a moderator, that makes you a private first class. But either way, you hold the billet of a Lance Corporal because you're doing the job of a higher ranking enlisted personnel kind of guy. What do you think about that, guys? Give me a bunch of ones if I sounded completely crazy. Yeah, well, it is, but it is Memorial Day. I am God, but I agree with you about that. I'm all about the military, but I'm not about the military-industrial complex. Read the book by Smedley Butler. By the way, if you were late to the game, happy Memorial Day, Smedley Butler, and everybody else who supports the Marine Corps community, especially the EAS Marines who are getting out at the Wounded Warriors Battalion in Camp Pendleton. These are a bunch of guys who are suffering from things like missing limbs. They're suffering from things like brain injuries, TBIs, and Memorial Day. Think about those guys. Some of them end up dying early. So remember them now and try to find ways to help our military veteran community by giving them jobs and doing business with them, even if it's buying a T-shirt from one of their channels that they're trying to start up. Help your vets, help the people who thought that they were fighting for you. That's what matters, is where they thought, not what the reality was. And the brotherhood is what matters, and the sisterhood. But you guys know what I'm talking about. So let's look at the requirements by state. In Kansas, you have to have 100 plus 2% the total number of votes cast for governor in the county in the last preceding election. This is in order to assemble a grand jury. In New Mexico, you have to have 2% of the registered voters of the county. In North Dakota, yeah, you sure, you betcha, 25% of the number of the votes cast in the county for office of governor of the state at the last general election. In Nebraska, 10% of the number of votes cast in the county for the office of governor of the state at the last general election. Nevada, and this is the Chile de Castro situation, for you people who have this arguendo, want to gather signatures and get the judge thrown off or indicted, I guess. 10% of the number of votes. I'm sorry, stand by. I don't know if I did Nebraska, but we can go to that. I think I did. 25% the number of voters voting within the county at the last preceding general election. So that's pretty significant. That's a lot of people. I don't know how many people know Delete Laws, know who he is, but I think that Team DLZ, give me a bunch of ones, guys, if you think that Team DLZ should rent every hotel in Nevada and come out with billboards and raise signatures just to see if they can do it. Clearly, I'm jesting. I don't want anybody to do that, but could you imagine how crazy that would be? Give me a bunch of ones if you think that that's possible. Now, in Oklahoma, to convene a grand jury, you've got to have a bunch of stuff. I didn't even want to get into it. It's up here on the screen for y'all to look at. Here. It's a little bit bigger. Somebody, I'll give you like 5 seconds. Take your thing and do a screenshot. Mark this. If you're a legal researcher, it's all right there for you. You can go ahead and take a screenshot. You can mark this right here. I don't know the exact where it's at on this, but you can mark it on the video. And let me just get back into this bad chicken. So just to kind of give you an idea. So Nevada's kind of an interesting state. You know, you can still carry a gun open. you can keep your gun in your car with a magazine in the mag well with no issues. And it's a constitutional Second Amendment rights type of a situation too. And so it still has, it has almost like the traditional conservative Democrat kind of feel to it, kind of like how it was in LA when I was growing up. And then you got these other states, you kind of see where they're at, Oklahoma, of course, the Bible Belt, they're going by the old school, let's get a citizen grand jury involved. Let's get upstanding leaders from the community involved in this situation because someone's life is potentially at risk here, right? So they're really about that. Really have a lot of respect for Oklahomans. My aunt is an Oklahoman. I think she's part Blackfoot Indian, as I recall. And really amazing person. So here we go. We're going to keep on going here. Give me a bunch of ones if you kind of like this map. This was from a source online. I'll give them credit in the description. I love these things. Everyone's broke, Christopher. Don't worry about it. You being here is what matters to me most. And then if you can take the advice and information that you learn from guests or from sources and apply it to have a better life and to stay free, then that's a good reward for me as well. And of course, just hit the like and subscribe button and just save it with people. Like spread the good news, like the Bible, right? Spread the good news. And then let's get into it. So I'm gonna get this cleared up so we can see it a little bit better. All right. So some states in the common law system, this is going to be people in states where you don't have like California, for example, you don't have the right to bring a common law, at least according to them, a citizen's grand jury. So in those states, you might try to do a common law one, but in order to pursue criminal charges, you're not going to be able to make it stick. That's basically what that is. And then now modern courts, especially federal ones, are just not favorable to these grand juries. So despite activists distributing indictments to congressional staff and doing all this stuff back in 2009, 172 campaigners apparently formed the Super American Grand Jury, and they accused Obama of treason and not being a U.S. citizen. And then Chief Judge Royce C. Lamberth said, no way, and dismissed this so-called indictment on July 2nd, 2009, saying that these groups lack legal standing and their presentments hold no force under U.S. law. And then in another case in 2013, a grand jury organized by Larry Klayman convicted Obama of fraud, but they also lacked legal standing and authority. So I hope that you understand what's going on here. We have these organizations of people who are trying to sort of take back their rights because they're not getting I saw the mic go off. Hopefully it wasn't bad. Because they're not getting their rights met based on their own observations of what our founding documents say their rights are. So this is an angry group of people because they know history and they've seen with their own eyes, not what a bunch of judges over time had eroded away, but what these actual documents say, and they're upset. And so what's happening is rather than try and appeal to these people in a way that would be fruitful, like try to work with these people who because a lot of the things they say have validity, rather than work with these people, instead the media and their friends in high places are trying to paint them as potential violent extremists and whack jobs. And that's not something that's helpful. This constant uniparty division that we're facing today is not helpful, and it's not going to help our nation heal. Give me a bunch of ones if you think that the grand jury system should allow exculpatory evidence. Also, give me a bunch of ones if you like the slideshow presentation today. I really appreciate you guys showing up and throwing me a couple of cool bonuses. And I also invite everybody to buy a copy of my book, How I Became a Lawyer Without a Law Degree. where I explained my journey of becoming a lawyer on the California State Bar Law Office Study Program, and then later getting a law degree from the University of West Los Angeles, and how I externed for the Court of Appeal as well as the Los Angeles City Attorney, and my journey working for all these top-rated lawyers all across the state of California, like multi-billion-dollar award-winning attorneys, and learning the law and doing it that way. And I really want to share that with you, because I want, especially people who are disabled vets, who are dejected because their dreams were cut short, but they still want to have an adversarial sort of, we'll fight a little bit. Law is a great career. And if you can learn the law and you have people around you who believe in you, you can do it too. You can become a lawyer. And some of you may already have the prerequisite bachelor's or AA, whatever your states might require. And what I'm doing here is I'm teaching people legal principles to where they can watch my videos and look at that as if it was a bar exam question, and then use that in their mind as a sort of marker, a navigation point to reference when they're thinking about stuff, when they're thinking about a principle of law, like what is a contract? What are the defenses to a contract? Well, fraud's a defense, but would you want to argue fraud if you want the contract to be enforced? Like the contract that we talked about the other day. And so by me doing that, that helps me understand the law, and it also helps me teach my kids, because hopefully they'll also pursue a career in law, because they could study under me and take over the firm and be set. You know, they would be lawyers, and they would be able to pursue doing justice for people who are in need of a lawyer who will even represent unpopular people. That's what we need, not the pop culture lawyer, the lawyer who's going to be there to fight for the commoner, the guy who is out there like the William Wallace, the unpopular guy who's fighting for your rights. Give me a bunch of ones if you think we need more lawyers who are willing to fight for justice instead of just a bunch of clicks and likes. Now, I really appreciate you coming out today, James Forbes, because you've always got positive and really great things to say. And I know that we have a large presence of veterans on this site. And I know that Chili goes out of his way to hire veterans and work with veterans. So I'm very grateful that all of you people are here today. And I gave everybody a really great shout out at this last motorcycle thing that we went to, and tried to make everybody see what a great job we're doing trying to help the common people. And I want everyone to remember and go back and take a look at the Uvalde, Texas video that I did several days ago, where we're trying to find the mother of who rescued her children during the Uvalde school massacre, despite the police arresting her and throwing her in jail. And now she's been separated from her kids by Child Protective Services. And so I am trying to find people in that area to help me locate her, so we can try and do a fundraiser and try to see if there's a way we can help her. If her kids are still separated from her, get her kids returned. I feel that great injustice was done, and I think that we all need to band together to try and help her. Now, beyond that, I hope that you all enjoyed this episode of sort of the history of what a civil grand jury is, as well as what it does, what its purpose is, and how the federal courts have interpreted it in such a way that it could make it very difficult for someone accused to have a fair trial, even because once you're painted or tainted by bad evidence, even if it can't be used against you at trial, there's always the chance that a juror has heard about it or somehow or another is going to rely on it. Once the cat's out of the bag, and it's, even if it's an untrue statement, if someone believes it, it's extremely damaging. And so that's something that you all need to be thinking about in these types of cases. So with respect to getting a civil grand jury against the trial judge in Chili's case, I would say the chances are very low, unless the people who asked me to do this reaction video can load up a bunch of buses and get a bunch of affidavits. I mean, offhand, based upon the numbers that I saw at the beginning, oh, TVO, what's up, Joe? Jody Shiloh, Jody Shiloh. Unless people have an enormous amount of money, I don't see this being something that's going to be a winner. And that's because it's got to be done within 180 days by affidavit. So it's much more difficult than voting in Nevada. You actually have to prove that you're the person who signed the document, which is totally different than the election system, unfortunately, which is sort of strange. Give me a bunch of ones if you think that that's totally unfair and outrageous, and that it takes all American citizens for fools. Give me a bunch of ones if you think that. Now, let's take a look here if there's any questions. Does anybody have any questions for me before I call it a day for this Memorial Day weekend Sunday? I think it's Sunday, isn't it? I'm just going to assume it's Sunday. I'm going to take a look down here. Now, yeah, okay. So, yeah, enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. I am trying to figure out a way to go to the Leathernecks bar tonight. If there's a way to get down there, I don't know. But it's pretty cool. It's a historic museum. So if you guys are ever in Nevada, if you get a chance, go check it out. It has historic relics from even from the Continental Marines all the way up. And it even has British Royal Marine Commando stuff. And they have really low price beer. The guy who runs the establishment, his name is Ghost. And he used to be one of the presidents of the Marine Riders Motorcycle Club. I don't know what chapter though, but the Marine Riders Motorcycle Club also showed up for my father's memorial, and they still do to this day. Really cool bunch of guys, super legit. And he was one of their presidents, and he runs that place. And when you walk in there, it's just so cool. There's all these like old machine guns and K-bars and pictures of Marine heroes, medals of honor, old uniforms on mannequins, and just the coolest stuff. It's super motivational, and their hamburgers are drop dead, just killer, way better than anything you'd get in the chow hall, guys. I mean, this stuff is top notch, top flight food. And that is the Leathernecks. I think it's called the Leathernecks Historic Bar and Museum. You can Google it. Super great place. I definitely recommend you come out for the Marine Corps birthday for that one, for that bar. It's the whole parking lot. It's just like a big block party, kegs everywhere, and they're just serving up beer, singing the Marine Corps hymn, having retired generals come and speak, Medal of Honor winners come and speak, and it's just so inspiring, so amazing. Give me a bunch of ones for our veterans who were fighting for you and me, and for the brother next to the right, left, and in front of them. And then I didn't know, Christopher, what you said. Oh, do I get a paid holiday? I wish I got a paid holiday. I don't ever get a paid holiday, but I do have my freedom and, relative freedom. I highly recommend that everybody here who has been following me on this channel really start learning the law. And we're going to start with contracts, and then we're going to move into torts, and then we're going to move into criminal law. But this is one of I'm not going to do it every day, right? But this is one of the videos that one of our viewers wanted me to talk about, to get into what is this whole civil grand jury thing about, and what is its feasibility? Is it even going to work? And so you've got my opinion. I don't think that a common law grand jury is going to be recognized by the people with the guns and the power. But I think that you could form your own parallel system where the power of shunning could form a sort of grand jury system, like similar to what the Amish, or to a lesser degree, the Mormons do. And I talked about that earlier in the video. I'd like to hear what your opinion is. And I appreciate, Chevy, it looks like you gave me some music. Unfortunately, when I click on it, I'm not able to open the link. And that's what bums me out. Now, Chevy, I don't know if you have my email, but I think you do. If you do, please send me a copy of this link, or find a way to send it to me through my website, and I'll take a look at it, and I'll post it on my community tab, because I really love it. So Chevy always makes this cool AI music for me and my friends, and I really think it's awesome. and I really appreciate it. So, and I am God. I'm always grateful that you show up. You always seem to be happy. You've never been banned, so somebody here must like you, because I have no control over the comments or anything like that as far as moderating. I'm too busy trying to figure out ways to keep you guys placated, because I know how bored people get unless they're watching like some kind of violence or somebody driving a car really fast doing 180s or 360s. But I'm glad that there are at least today 20 to 30 people who are interested in learning about the civil grand jury, criminal grand jury indictment system and how it works under the federal and state level. So that being said, I want everybody to enjoy their Memorial Day weekend, and make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. Semper Fi, do or die.